Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. All right, let's see if I can get this swapped over successfully. Because I have a slideshow. A slideshow on here. That's not. That is correct. All right, so I might have messed up the formatting when I made this, so you're going to see some weird white bars around it. That's just to show how well prepared I was for this. Well, if you were hoping for a Mother's Day sermon, I apologize because that's not what I have prepared. You'll just have to put up with my lesson. I hope you all had ominous music in your head when I said that. I'll put this up here. Cool. Off to a great start. All right, so I think it was Wednesday. Being the chronically online teenager I am, I was scrolling through YouTube because I was bored, and I came across a video that was titled, if I can remember it, it was titled Religion and There Is No God, which is already an interesting enough title. And it was by a comedian by the name of George Carlin. I don't know how many of you know who that is. I'm looking around for any signs of life. Okay, I see nods of approval. And you probably know that, those that know him probably know he's quite a vulgar speaker. And this 10-minute video I watched basically was him just ridiculing religion, all the different facets, almost said faucets, all the different facets of it, all of the different elements, things like how pointless prayer is, how I worship the sun, things like that. And I could go lesson by lesson on all this stuff, but I want to say that he presented an amazing straw man argument, which I'm not saying his arguments are good. I'm going to explain what a straw man argument is if you don't know what that is. A straw man argument, you see that straw man up there? Doesn't he look so stupid? He can't say anything back. He's a straw man. That's exactly what a straw man argument is, and that's exactly what George Carlin did throughout this whole video, is he just tore at all of these elements of Christianity especially, but there's no way to fight back, because who was in his audience that was going to fight back? But I don't want to talk about that, because I was scrolling through the scrolling through the comments, because I was curious to see what other people thought, and unfortunately a lot of people agreed with him. But I'm sure you can guess which comment caught my attention. It had something to do with history. And the comment in particular said that 95% of the world's conflicts can be placed at the feet of religion. And that's what I want to talk about. Can 95% of the world's conflicts be placed at the feet of religion? And as I was thinking about this argument, where's my water? As I was thinking about this argument, I also started to think about the fact that as a whole, there's this argument that I've been seeing spring up more and more about this idea, or rather this argument, promoting that religion is violent. And I'm here today to ask, is religion violent? But as I was thinking about this, I also wondered, why is this such an important argument? Because when it comes to these sort of apologetics conversations, some of the best ways to fight back against them is by first looking at where they originate from, because you can pretty easily figure out whether they're actually legitimate arguments or not, looking at where they come from. But I should have planned this, but let's say that you were in a conversation with an atheist, a very passionate atheist. You're talking with them, let's say, you've debunked Big Bang, you have talked about how flawed evolution is. What if they say, well, I don't want to support a religion that supports violence? Well, there's two parts to this that I want to talk about. First one, again, is why do they bring that up? Why is that such a big argument now? And there's another element that I'll get to later. I'll save the surprise. So first I want to ask, why is this a popular argument now? Because I'm sure there's several in this room that in the 1900s, I'm not calling you old, that several of you in the 1990s, I don't want to be that broad. In the 1990s, for example, would say that this argument was never really a thing. I think the George Carlin video came out in 1996. That doesn't matter. But for a while, this really wasn't an argument that atheists would bring up. I mean, it was really a sort of situation of let bygones be bygones, that you believe in your Christianity, and I believe in my atheism. But especially as of recently, this has become a really popular argument I've seen. I mean, again, being the chronically online teenager I am, I see all sorts of things pop in my recommendation, good and bad, that there were several, almost a full year ago now, that I got bombarded with a bunch of videos of why I left this religion or that religion, and a lot of it was because I didn't want to see the violence. And I want to see if that's an actual valid reason. So I think where this argument originated from is, this is going to sound out of left field from someone like me, but I think it starts from the 2001 attacks. Because when somebody is dedicated to fighting against something they don't want to believe in, they're going to pull out every possible excuse they can. And this argument is no different. And the 2001 attacks, of course, were completely religiously motivated. You have the attackers who believed that they were on a holy mission to curb American imperialism. And this, I think, really got the ball rolling for people at that time that wanted another stance to fight back at Christianity. So it's sort, I don't know if this is actually what it's called, but I call it the drip down effect, where basically you have all these different pins where, well, let's see. You have these Muslims who were religiously motivated to do this violence. So therefore, since it's a religion, wouldn't Christianity do the same? And as such, there's a lot of different arguments. There's something on my side that's in the way. There we go. As such, they come up with a lot of different arguments as to this argument. Boy, wording. One argument that I imagine is probably going to be brought up pretty soon is the conflict. I don't know if it's conflict anymore. I haven't caught up with it. But the stuff going on between India and Pakistan in the Kashmir territory. Kashmir is divided between Hindus and Muslims. Pakistan is Muslim, India is Hindu. And back in the 1940s when they gained their independence, the territory was immediately fought over because Pakistan wanted it because it had Muslims, and India wanted it because it had Hindus. Wars, I think there was 3 wars fought over it because of religious difference. And then you look a little bit further away in the Middle East in the 2010s, you have ISIS and all these other terrorist organizations, Hamas, what other ones? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there's a lot out there. But then probably the most popular example that they'll point to throughout history is that fellow in the bottom left. That is a crusader, and if you're going to come in contact with somebody that's going to use this argument, I'm willing to bet they're going to bring up the Crusades about how fighting for the Holy Land and all the killing that went on was wrong. And then talking about the Holy Land, you have Israel and Palestine. I mean, they're divided over religious differences. This is one standpoint that I think people who use this argument are going to talk about. I can't call it modern because I think the Crusade was in there. Well done, me. These are popular examples that they're going to use. Some other examples that they might use is just history as a whole. I mean, you look throughout all of, especially the Middle Ages and medieval era as a whole, all these kings that are chosen by God who then go out, that are then crowned, and one day they point at this group of people, hey, these people don't support Christianity, let's get them. And a lot of wars were started this way. And there's some deeper meanings behind this that I'll get to later. But if you're going to encounter somebody who's talking about this argument, the one argument that I'm willing to bet that they are always going to have is the biblical Old Testament violence that went on. And if you know your scripture, you're going to know why this happened. You're going to know why. But you got to put it in the shoes that this is an atheist who has probably, at most, spent a day in a religious person's shoes. They're going to have no idea why, because they're only looking at their side. They're going to look at the side that, I want to believe this, so I'm going to build my argument off that. And so they build their argument off that. Now I'm going to turn to Joshua chapter 6, verse 20 through 21, because I think this is the one they're going to point to the most. Oh yeah, I forgot to use the thumb drive as a bookmark. Joshua chapter 6, verses 20 through 21. If I can find it. So the people shouted, and priests blew the trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. Now this is the verse they're going to use a moment today. They utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, and ox and sheep and donkeys, with the edge of the sword. Sounds pretty violent to me. And as such, to them, it makes perfect sense why they would use this for their standpoint. Let's get a little closer home. Why was Jesus crucified? The Jews didn't think he was their Messiah. And so they put him up on the cross because they thought he was going to be this destined ruler who was going to crack the Roman Empire and restore Israel to its former glory. Sounds pretty violent to me. So then let me ask again. Is religion violent? Or are religious people violent? Now, just to overview the 3 points that I think, the 3 points that people are going to use in this argument. I should have been more broad with the first one, but you have the sort of the modern violence going on, not just extremism. I'll explain that in a minute. You have the historical wars, you have all the crusades, all the wars of religion that they're probably going to use, especially if they're going by the literal meaning of the 95% of the conflicts around the world are caused by religion. If they're going by that literal meaning, they'll probably bring this up. And then the biblical examples is the one I want to spend the most time on because that's the one they're going to talk about the most. So going back to the modern extremism, is it modern religious violence or is it people misguided by religion? Because if you look at all the stuff that's going on, especially in the Middle East today, which religion is that? Is that Christianity or is that Muslim? And I'm not trying to attack Islam or anything like that. I mean, it's wrong, but that's not what I'm trying to do. The problem with Islam is that the Quran, which is their religious text, if you don't believe in Muhammad and all of their religious beliefs, the Quran tells you, go kill these people. So, by definition, it is a violent religion. But the problem with asking, is religion violent? People are going to think of it from any point, from any religion. The problem is there's only one true religion, and that's Christianity, of course. So not only is using this argument for Islam completely pointless because you're advocating against something that has no basis in the first place, but also there's no modern Christian example of this going on. And there was a article I was reading. I don't agree with all of this person's points, but I think this definitely summarizes the argument pretty well. It was exactly what I'm talking about. Does religion cause violence? The myth of religious violence promotes a dichotomy between us and the secular West, who are rational and peacemaking, and them, the hordes of violent religious fanatics in the Muslim world. Their violence is religious and therefore irrational and divisive. Our violence, on the other hand, is rational, peacemaking, and necessary. Regrettably, we find ourselves forced to bomb them into the higher rationality. Now, it's pretty violent, but I do think it summarizes pretty well why people are going to use this argument today, especially. But then, the idea of extremism as a whole, they're not going to focus on that. When people are going to use this argument, they're going to be pretty broad. They're probably more than likely going to bring up the whole idea of culture wars and how the rest of the world is supporting, even advocating, let's say, homosexuality. Let's just go with that. And then you have these churches which are supporting homophobia. The problem with them using this is that both sides are wrong, and let me explain. Ezekiel 33:11. If I can find it. That's not the right book. There it is. Ezekiel 33:11. Say to them, as I live, declares the Lord God, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn back from your evil ways. Why then will you die, O house of Israel? This is a little bit out of context. I'm sorry, Ben, even though he's not here. But the point of me bringing this up is that God does not hate the sinner. He hates the sin. So you have these churches who are just hardline. How would you describe it? They are hardline against anything of the rainbow color, which, of course, we need to be against the idea but not the people. So when people bring up this idea that, well, you support homophobia, no, these churches do. They don't represent us. So then moving on to the historical wars. What was the actual true motive? Because 99.99999% of the time, these were not completely religious wars. Going back to the king who points to this group of people, you don't support my religion, you're going to die. That's not because they love them. That's because they want power. It's out of selfish greed. All of these wars that they're going to point to, the Crusades weren't right because God never tells us to go to war to reclaim this Holy Land. As such, we shouldn't support it, of course, but when they bring those things up, we got to bring up the true motives. It wasn't religious, it was a power grab. It was selfish. So for them to throw sand in the eyes using this argument that historical wars, I don't want to support all these historical wars, as such, I'm not going to be a Christian. It doesn't make any sense because there's not a single conflict after the Old Testament that God condones. All these conflicts that people go off on are wrong, and there's a specific verse I'm going to use later that ironically is from James. I say ironically because a lot of our class this morning was about James, so that's a nice coincidence. And then the third point that I want to spend majority of the time on is the biblical violence. Oh, hey, is that Jonah? Let's look at Jonah real quick. Jews in the Old Testament, Clayton, I'm sorry, I think I'm stealing exactly what you said last week. Jews in the Old Testament had their standards. I mean, they had their 10 Commandments. They had all of the rules regarding the covenant. So did the Gentiles. Just looking at all of Jonah, it's implied, really, that these Gentiles, which were from Syria, and as such were Gentiles, had some kind of religious standard. Let's see, which one do I want? Let's look at Jonah 3:5. Then the people of Nineveh believed in God, and they called a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. Maybe that's not the one I should have brought. 3:8. But both man and beast must be covered with sackcloth. Not those ones, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go verses 1 and 2 of chapter 1. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. That implies that they had a standard that God had set to them. We don't know what the standard was, but it's implied all throughout Jonah that these people knew they were doing something wrong, and they repented. What does repenting mean? Turning away from something you know is wrong. So as such, all of these Gentile nations had some kind of standard. And this is important because the reason that all this violence occurs is because God's just trying to protect his people. All throughout Joshua, when they're killing all of the inhabitants of the land, it's because God knows what they will do to Israel is wrong. I mean, look what happens in Judges. The Jews didn't kill all the inhabitants, and so all of Judges happens. All the violence, all the wrongdoing is because they didn't kill the inhabitants. And they would say that's cruel, the people you're arguing against. It's implied that the Gentiles had their standards, and if God saw it fit to go to this means to get them out of the land, then it's clear that God had given them a chance. I mean, it was no surprise when the Israelites arrived to the Promised Land. People there knew. And it's also, let me see if I can find it. The spies for Jericho, they weren't killed. Not the spies, excuse me. The family that housed the spies. They weren't killed because they turned to God and they joined the Israelites. Had the rest of the inhabitants done that, it never would have been necessary to kill them. But God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that this is what had to happen. As Ryan read from James chapter 1, verses 16 through 18, I'm just going to read it again because I think this is where a huge part of fighting back against this argument comes from. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing given and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. in the exercise of his will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, so that we would be a kind of first fruits among his creatures. Now, there's a lot of different meaning to this than just the one I want to use, but I want to use this verse because it highlights God in his infinite wisdom knows what's good for us. He knew what was good for the Israelites, and the Israelites didn't listen, and so Judges happened. And then I think the key verse in all of this is also found in James, chapter 1, verses 19 through 20. This you know, my beloved brethren, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. You can use that single verse for all of this. All this violence that goes on, all the wars of religion, that's man's anger. If it was God's anger, he would have commanded it. But he didn't. I'm not going to lie, I forgot why I put it. Judges chapter 21, verse 25 just highlights. I'm going to skip this because I definitely had somewhere else I was going to go with this. But. And this is another source that I got a really good wake-up call from when I was studying for this lesson. From the very beginning, Yahweh made it clear that the Canaanites were distinct from all other nations. They were not distinct just because they worshipped other gods or were sinful, for that was true of all the nations, including the Israelites at times. What made them distinct was the extent of their sin, their cultural approval of their sin and rebellion, and their unwillingness to relent or repent of their evil. All throughout Joshua and then even into Judges, the Canaanites were repeating their evil. And God knew this ahead of time. That's why he told the Israelites to kill them. And when the Israelites didn't, that was just another tick into why Judges happened. So then let's get back to the question. Is religion violent? Rather, is Christianity violent? No. People who are misguided by Christianity are violent. The Crusades, the Jews who killed Jesus, all these people were misguided. No. Religious people are violent. And are they right? Just read James chapter 1, verses 19 through 20, and you'll get your answer. Okay, good time. Now, an invitation is going to be offered, and if you can't tell, you're probably not the person you're going to... I'm not the person you're really going to want to talk to if you have an invitation. So Clayton's going to come down to the front, and if you have any concerns that you want to bring before the church, talk to him. But please stand as we go into a song of invitation.